if you let your branding grow wild and go wild, your brand can become unfocused. How do we ensure that our branding is in mint condition? Welcome to another episode of Nourish Your Brand, where we dive into your branding to pick out the freshest, most vibrant insights to help your business thrive. I'm Aiza, your host and the brand chef at Studio Koya. I'm ready to serve up another flavorful episode for you. So in this show, I dish out things your business craves so that I can turn it into a brand that you're super confident about and super proud of. We're talking strategies, insights, and golden nuggets of wisdom to nourish your brand and to attract and connect with your dream clients and customers. So let's get started with this week's episode. So today we are going to be talking about mint and also what it teaches us about managing our branding and how it affects our brands. So what is it? Mint, it's fresh, it's invigorating. If you've ever grown it, you know that it's a really easy plant to grow, but also there's a little thing of it has its mind of its own. So if you don't put it in a pot, planted it in your garden, it spreads like wildfire if it's unchecked and it takes over everything. So we got to be careful of that. But if it's managed carefully, it actually flourishes and thrives and it's ready for you to pick and use however you see fit, whether it's in a really good mojito or a nice refreshing salad. When you do it right, when you grow it right, it really blooms into this really cool plant that you can use over and over again and harvest over and over again. So that is a lot like branding. When you think of your branding, both in terms of strategy and identity, it's like it's the mint of your business garden. If you let your branding grow wild and go wild, your brand can become unfocused. It dilutes your core messages and the actual purpose of your brand. It can also start to become confusing because it's buried and hidden amongst the other aspects of your business. So just like mint, when it grows in the garden and it grows wild, sometimes it pops up on the complete other side and you're like, where did that mint come from? But that's where it comes from. And then all the other plants that you have around would basically block or hide the mint and you'll be like, where is it? I can't even find it to use anymore. So that's the same in branding. You don't want your brand to grow wild and roam free. It may seem really liberating at first because you've got lots to work with, lots to work from, but without direction and without a container for it, it risks spreading really far and actually dilutes it to a point where it has no impact at all. So we got to be careful of that. So how do we ensure that our branding is in mint condition? So first, we need to do some strategic pruning. Just as mint requires regular trimming to prevent it like overtaking the garden, your branding needs to be looked at from time to time. So you need to do a little audit, maybe I would say every 3 to 6 months, just to check in with your brand, check in with your business, just to make sure it's on the right track. So things that you might want to think about while you're pruning are what messages are resonating with your audience, which visuals had people being like, oh yeah, that really looked so good and so on brand. Are your clients coming to you and saying, oh, your values really come across, or I saw this post and I actually thought of you, right? It might be certain things that become really recognizable. So you can look at it and then keep what works, but also don't be afraid to cut back what doesn't. Sometimes I think we're always thinking about adding and making things better, and we think that adding new things would make things better, but actually cutting back and pruning and making sure that you keep the right things in your branding is also super, super important. Just like a plant, just like mint, right? If you don't prune it, it can go all spindly and stretch out and go in different directions. When you prune it nicely, it grows into a nice little round, thriving little plant. So that's the first thing that you can do to ensure your brand is in mint condition. The next thing is defining boundaries. So mint thrives when it knows its limits. When most people plant it in a garden, really you should be putting it in a pot so it doesn't go crazy. It doesn't like spread all across your garden. And that's the same with branding. So if you have guidelines, use your brand guidelines. You need to refer back to it often, making sure you're sounding like what you should be sounding like with your brand's voice, with your personality, and then aesthetics as well. Have you veered too far off, or are you still keeping to the guidelines? And also you think about your customer experience too, right? When someone comes to work with you, are they coming to you and getting what they expect? That's what your guidelines can do for you. It gives you a framework to follow so you don't go wild and put in loads of things that shouldn't be there. If you don't have guidelines, you can quickly set some parameters for yourself. So look at what you've got now, look at what you love doing, what your clients are resonating with, and then just put them on like a Notion page or type it up in a Google Doc and stick with them for a few months, and then come back and see if those things are working for you, or if you want to add something else to it or take something out. So that would be really helpful so that you're not veering too far away from what your branding foundations are. And then lastly, we don't want to forget about adaptation and flexibility. Like all I've been talking about is, pruning it, making it small, fitting it into a box. But actually, there are strengths in the Mint, versatility and flexibility. So that's the same with your branding. It can be like the star, or you can use it as a subtle accent. You can flex and change how you use your branding depending on the situation. So for example, you wouldn't use your branding on TikTok the same way you would use it in a proposal that you send to a client. So when you're using your branding, look at the context, right? Make sure that you're adapting it, like dialing it up, dialing it back down, using a lot of it and using less of it, depending on where you're using it and who you're talking to. But all in all, you'll still stay within the roots. It's just changing, I guess, the amount of branding that you use depending on where you're using them. So an action step that I'd like you to take is just to have a moment and reflect on how your branding is doing. Has your branding gotten to the point where it's just all spread out, like you don't know what's what, you don't even know what the core of your branding is now? Is it all spindly and all over the place? Or have you been cultivating it, and have you been pruning it and making sure that you keep within the parameters, and have you been using it really well? Are there areas where you could trim back, or perhaps places where you can add a little bit more so that it can flourish more? So it really depends on what you're doing now with your branding. So have a think and reflect on that. Here are a few areas that you can prune or think about. So your core purpose, your audience and your values. So that's your foundation, that's your strategy part. So think about, are you using them? Are you still aligned with them? Does your audience still think that you're talking to them and resonating with them? What are your values? Have they changed over time? So think about those things, and those are the things you can change or prune or even add to if you don't have them in place. And then in terms of aesthetics, in terms of a brand identity and visually, you can look at your color palette. Did you want to change up, not necessarily change the color palette, but change up the emphasis maybe? Maybe you've overused a certain color and you want to bring it back into balance, or you want to really punch up that one color that you know that your brand is super recognizable if people see a certain type of orange, for example. Same goes for your typography. Have you added loads, and have you got 10 different fonts that you've used that you've collected from all your different templates that you've grabbed from the internet, or anywhere that it comes from? Really, sometimes it just pops up from nowhere and you're like, okay, now I have 10 typefaces. You can prune that, and you can maybe change up also the accent font that you use, just to gather everything back and make sure that everything's cohesive. So that's the way you can think about it and prune and make sure your branding is right for you and is working for you. Don't forget to refer back to your brand guidelines, or create some brand guidelines that you can follow, and you can update this while you prune so that you can ensure that everything you do is consistent. And being consistent means you build trust and recognition with your potential clients. You want them to know what to expect, and by having that consistency with your brand guidelines, you'll be able to reach them in a way where they're like, oh yeah, I know what Aiza's about. She talks about this. This is what she looks like on the internet, and they know what they can expect. So brand guidelines will really help you do that. Again, if you haven't got any, just make it really simple. These are the fonts I use, these are the colors I use, this is my logo, and these are my core messages that I talk about when I talk about my brand and my business. So the goal here isn't to create more work for you, it's just to have a checker in place, because yes, you can grow, but if it's unchecked and the branding grows and it is untamed, then everything gets spread out and gets diluted. So it's about growing and adding with intention, with direction, and with purpose. So just like a well-tended mint plant, it adds life and flavor to anything that you put it in. A well-managed brand brings vitality and longevity to your business. So that wraps up our chat on Mint. If you're looking for more guidance on keeping your branding in mint condition, I do that as part of my process in the Brand Kitchen, which is my signature offer where I take your brand from bland to bursting with personality. And if you're craving more insights on how to nourish your brand, you can get new episodes straight into your inbox by signing up to The Spread, which is my email newsletter at studiokoya.com/newsletter. And yeah, so that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will chat to you next time.